Welcome, everybody. Super excited to have you joining us. We are going to give it probably 30 more seconds for folks to join as they're getting tied in, and then we will jump in. So I guess in the meantime, I will introduce our webinar today and our speakers, and can also mention our upcoming webinar. So today's topic is near and dear to my heart, actually, because this is something that I wish I had had more conversations about when I was becoming an entrepreneur, which is how to actually have the conversation with your partner, and being able to have the conversation, how to, maybe even selecting the right partner at times, maybe a conversation. But if you're already in a relationship, how to ensure that you're having the conversation with your partner about entrepreneurship, really getting their support, but also preparing them for the realities of entrepreneurship and what that really means, because none of us are truly ready. And even after you've done it a time or two, you're still not ready for the third time. So just the reality. So that's going to be today's conversation, is talking to your partner about making the leap to entrepreneurship. Our upcoming webinar, if you're interested, on January 11th, we have a webinar that's going to be called New Year, New Firm, How to Launch Your Own RIA in 2023. So if you're interested in that and starting your own RIA, that'll be a great conversation, sort of piggybacking on this one today. And so that content will be in the chat. If you, as we're going through, this is going to be fairly conversational as I talk with our guests. But if you have questions, submit them on the right side. Hopefully this side, depending on if it's mirrored. But on the right side, there's the chat function, which the team will be in. We can be able to interact there. There's also the questions function. And so if you go to questions, you can submit questions there, and then I can bring those in and be able to ask our esteemed guests for their feedback there. So those are going to be the two toggles to go between, are the chat and the questions. And with that, really excited to welcome our two guests, Sarah Ponder and Brandon Juodikis. I appreciate you both taking the time to come on this. I always want to call it the show because I'm used to the podcast. Come on this webinar, this event, and be able to share your expertise, your experience that you went through as you decided to launch your own firm. So just want to give guests give our viewers a bit of a background for each of you. So Sarah, I'll let you kick off and just sort of introduce yourself, your firm, and just a little bit about sort of what led you to starting your own practice.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ponder. I'm the founder of Real Estate Wealth Planning here in Austin, Texas. We serve realtors and real estate professionals, generally not real estate investors. They're a different breed than what I do. My husband, Ross Ponder, is a real estate agent and now actually broker here in Austin, Texas. And what led, it's a long story, I am sure we're going to get to, but the high points are that I just kind of always personally done personal finance stuff throughout my career. I was a middle school teacher out of college through a program called Teach for America. Then worked in this financial literacy startup, doing tech and kind of working alongside banks and other financial institutions, got an MBA. So just generally had an interest in it, never formally worked in finance until after my MBA. I worked at Dimensional Fund Advisors, which is a big investment firm that I like to call Fancy Vanguard, if you're not familiar with them. From there, I knew about XY, the team that I worked on at Dimensional. I didn't personally work with XYPN members, but I worked literally in desks right next to the people who did. And so I was very familiar with the organization. I worked mostly on the institutional side of the business at Dimensional and didn't love that. It was fine. I definitely wanted to work more with people. So I did my CFP coursework online over a couple of maternity leaves. And then in 2020, when the whole world was reevaluating their life, I did too. And, I had been preached the story of the get a niche. And so I was just like, you know what, let me go talk to some realtors. And so I did a bunch of market research on realtors. There wasn't really anybody serving realtors. So I launched a firm right at 2 years ago, serving realtors.
And just to clarify, you said you worked on your CFP over maternity leave. That's like extra
Leaves, yes.
leaves. That is boss level on studying. I barely got through it, and I was in school.
Yeah,
So
I had this. So I started it I have three kids. One is almost five. I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And Lucy, I started it on her maternity leave, so in 2018. Then we moved and took some time off, and I finished it. I finished all my coursework while like 40 weeks pregnant. I turned in the capstone sort of while having contractions, about to go into labor. And then
so it's sent, so
for
the
my
CFP
for my
sent you
second,
into labor. Got it.
basically, it's the only course I got an A on, so I don't know if that helped. Then took the test while on maternity leave with my second child, Hank, 3 years ago. Passed it, and I had completely blocked out this memory until actually after XYPN Live this year. I couldn't even tell you what the man's name was, but it's another member in Washington State. We ended up sharing an Uber to the airport just a month ago. And we were talking about this story, and he asked me about when I got my CFP and all of that. And I was like, yeah, I did the exam in November when my son was 2 months old. And he was like, did you have to like stop in the middle of the exam to pump? I was like, no, because I had completely blocked that memory out. And then I thought about it, and I did. I think that like whole like section of my life just is a complete blur. But yeah, I
Yep.
did. I had to like take the first half of the exam, go to the car, come back, take the other half of the exam.
Wow.
That's awesome. Okay, I have lots more questions about that. So, but before we get to that, Brandon, I asked you the same question, just some background on you and your practice, and sort of what led you to starting your own firm.
Sure. So I'm Brandon, obviously, and I started BRJ Wealth Management about 3 months in now. Very exciting, still very fresh and new to everything here. But I've been in the industry since I graduated in 2014. I was working in a bank for a couple of years, got my license, and then the advisor I was working with went to start his own firm and brought me with him as his pair planner. And so we kind of started from scratch essentially there. We had a little book that came over. And so we've kind of just been growing for the last 6 years now. And then ultimately, with where I'm at in my life personally and my wife, we decided we want to kind of make a change in where we live and kind of like what's the bigger benefit for our bigger picture for our family here, really long term. And so ultimately, I had to make the leap of faith here and start my own. I'm in the Chicagoland area right now, but we'll be moving back to Michigan. And I don't know, just taking it one day at a time here, really.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, I was going to ask what was sort of the impetus for launching a firm, and it sounds like a known relocation. Is that sort of what
I mean,
initially prompted that discussion?
so there's a million variables, and I've gone through this with my wife. It's probably been almost a year now. We've been weighing this decision here, and so from a personal perspective, we want to see like what's better for us long term. The ultimate flexibility, being your own business owner, writing your own paychecks, but also like, professionally too. I've always wanted to have my name on the front door, or I want to make sure that I'm in control and ultimately have the say in where we're going to take this thing, and so it's going to be what I make from it.
So it is it sounds like sort of all the key components. It's the flexibility, the autonomy, some of the control components that sort of converge to that it was the
Yeah,
right fit for you.
I also I have a 1-year-old now, and so I've been able to spend more time with her being home. I'm kind of running, I say, a daddy daycare in the morning shift here. She goes to her nap, and then my wife comes home. She's a 5th grade teacher. She'll come home from work and then take the afternoon as I'm working my business here. So it's
Okay.
just being able, instead of the classic 8 to 5, I was driving an hour commute each way, missed out on a lot of daytime family time, and then I'm calling it a slingshot method. You're losing that guaranteed paycheck you got from your job to kind of hopefully propel you down the road for ultimately what's best for you and your family.
Yeah, I recently heard the term from some members called the on-call parent, which I appreciate because, like, yeah, everyone calls the dad the babysitter, right? Like, oh, you're babysitting your kid. Like, no, they're my kid.
Yeah.
But I like daddy daycare. But yeah, I mean, that the on-call parent, and sometimes that you're on call in the morning, sounds like your wife's on call in the afternoon for, who's ultimately accountable and responsible. Super interesting that you both have young kids. Part of that is the sort of median age of XYPN members is about 40, which means half the members are under 40. And so just at that age, but also interesting that, generally parenthood and entrepreneurship are not synonymous. You either have kids, you either start the business before you have kids or you wait till they're grown. And this is an industry where we're seeing a lot more young parents or folks who are starting their families are interested in becoming an entrepreneur. So it's a little bit of a deviation from the topic, but can y'all both talk about sort of your experience being parents of young kids and starting a business and how that has worked for you and your partner? Sarah, I'll start with you.
It's been wild. And I have to say, I mean, so I started mine at the end of 2020, and obviously things continued to be really weird with the pandemic for a good year after that. We had a ton of childcare and just logistical challenges that got thrown at us. Like 2 weeks after I launched my firm, we had, well, let me back up. So when I launched, I was about halfway pregnant with Ruth, my third child. And I'll be honest, I just kind of didn't, I love Dimensional as a firm. They do great work. I was kind of square peg, round hole there. I'm very entrepreneurial, and because of the nature of their business, you kind of need to, do
Fit the mold. Yep.
Yeah. And that's not my style. And they were not, to be candid, like from a HR perspective, they were not ready for the pandemic. Like they executed. There was absolutely no issues on the like client side, but it was a very in-person formal firm, and so moving to the Zoom experience was not natural for them. And there is, it was still challenging to be a working mom in that environment. And my husband, for the first time in our professional or in our marriage, we've been married almost 10 years. He was now the breadwinner at that point. He had never been before. His prior life before real estate was actually as an academic. He was in a PhD program for a long time that he didn't finish, which was an extremely good decision for him. Made no money while I was kind of working in tech and finance. And then things flipped. And so I didn't like sitting on my computer from 8 to 5 in the office while pregnant and kind of hearing my kids in the playroom right on the other side of the door. I just wanted a little more flexibility. And so, when I launched, I knew I wasn't going to take very many clients up front because I was going to give birth again in a couple of months. But primarily, like, I didn't want our kids to have to go to school from 8 to 5, which of course they had been prior. So we ended up we have an au pair that lives in our house on that side of the wall. And so that was a lifesaver for a bit during 2020. And then we didn't have one in most of 2021. So I ended up doing a lot of childcare in 2021, and which took a toll, obviously, on the business. But now we have an au pair. We have a new au pair, and they all go to school basically in the morning. And so what that means is that when sometimes I pick them up. It's kind of a tag team situation. But I often get to like see them for 15 minutes at lunchtime right before they take a nap, or for a little bit before they go out for an afternoon activity. And that's just really nice. And it's not something that I really could have done in another structure.
That makes sense. Brandon, anything to add in terms of sort of your experience starting a firm with a little one?
Yeah, it's Alan, this has been the biggest challenge, honestly, is the schedule my wife and I have to go with here because we don't have childcare in our situation. That's going to be hopefully a big helping piece when we do move back to Michigan next year. But right now, like I said, I'm working with with my daughter from when she wakes up in the morning until around noon or 1. She takes her nap, and then my wife gets home from her job and she takes the afternoon shift while I'm working. So I don't really see her or them. I'll pop up for dinner, or, for a half hour or so. But that's the struggles that we know. This is a short term kind of challenge for us, but we know ultimately that it's going to be great. So it's just get through these first couple months here.
Talk to me about if you can remember the first conversation that you remember about this idea of entrepreneurship that you had with your partner. Sarah, can you remember the first time you talked to your husband about this idea that maybe you could start your own business instead of continuing? Because it sounds like y'all sort of operate in an entrepreneurial world on the real estate side. And so
We do.
maybe it wasn't super unexpected, but I don't know, your husband was a PhD student. They're not known to be the most entrepreneurial. I speak that from someone who thought about that career path myself. So yeah, I guess, can you remember that first conversation?
I have thought about this and I cannot. I don't, Ross, do you remember the first time we talked about me joining this firm? I don't know. My husband's right over there. So if he thinks of something, he'll let me know. He says it was a very slow roll and that I wore him down over time.
I love that.
So yeah, neither of us came from entrepreneurial families. Both of our families are very traditional type of jobs. That said, I got an MBA and I worked in a startup, and so I actually didn't know that I eventually would start a company or a firm. I mean, I wasn't even in financial planning. I was like barely in finance before my MBA. And so I do remember when I started the CFP coursework, 5 years ago, roughly, almost 5 years ago, I remember just thinking it would be something I would do in my 40s. Like I would stay at Dimensional, maybe become a planner in my 40s. I'm 37 now, and I launched 2 years ago. So it wasn't even on my mind for a while. And we're both savers. And so we're both, I would say I'm more conservative financially, I think, than he is, or I was more conservative financially than he is. Now I think I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a little bit riskier. Yeah, I mean, all I really remember is just, someone told me about XY. So I started listening to the podcast, the Kits' podcast. And then just like, as I would learn things, we would just have conversations about what that would look like from the various podcasts, just like how to niche. I listened to all of the like benchmarking study podcasts. I've probably only listened, honestly, to probably 25-30% of the podcast. I haven't listened to like every single one, like some of those people.
Well, there's only 350 hours of content. So yeah.
Yeah. And I cannot listen to podcasts on like anything faster than one. Like I have to just keep it. I also can't listen to audiobooks. I don't know what it is about like the way audiobooks work, but they just don't work for me. So yeah, I remember it being like lots of iterative conversations. Like every time I heard something, learned something new, that's just kind of how we work. We're very, now we're both entrepreneurs, but we're very communicative. We're both sort of extroverty. We're both very much in each other's businesses. I'm kind of his strategic partner as well in his real estate business. And he actually does some work with financial planners other than me. So,
were there any particular points of contention or lack of alignment that you can remember really having to work through?
Definitely. So 20, as everybody probably knows, 2020 and 2021 were completely bananas in the real estate industry. And they were for him too. And even 2019 kind of was as well. And so he was just working a lot. It felt like around the clock. And I would say the main point of contention was just we had both been accustomed to, me having a 6-figure paycheck that was really not that hard to get, and him having the sort of flexibility and the freedom to earn money or not earn money. And so it was the first time that he actually did have to earn money in order to support the family. Because while we have very robust retirement savings, we never really wanted to tap that. And so, we very much launched my firm with him as the primary breadwinner for the last couple of years. And so he had to get through that because he had not ever had that mindset.
That's fair. So it's not necessarily that he wasn't making any money, but he wasn't accountable for household income while you were getting ramped up, and so just had to create a more stable income stream. And I imagine for two entrepreneurs, that's a unique situation where kind of you're both trying to start businesses at the same time and balancing.
His was more established, but yeah.
Okay, so he was a little earlier.
Yeah, he started in 2018, so he was about 3 years in, and he made more money than I did at Dimensional, and so it was not a concern. But he had when he was a PhD student, he made like $16,000 a year, and so he just never had that need.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. And a reminder for attendees, if you have questions that you'd like to ask, then over on the right-hand side, there's the questions tab. It's the second one down. Looks like a little person sitting in front of a screen. I'm not sure why that's the question. Maybe a question mark would make more sense, but that's the little icon. So if you click there, you can ask questions. You can also chat with each other in the chat function. So Brandon, can you remember the sort of the early conversations about this idea of entrepreneurship and sort of how those got started?
Yeah. So wife and I were living in the city, no kids at the time. It was during COVID. And so everything shut down. We weren't going to the office or anything. And so I kind of sectioned off one side of the apartment. My wife's working on the other side of the apartment. She's a teacher, so she's got students all the time. And I was, meet with clients a couple times a day through Zoom or just phone calls. And I kind of got this aha moment, I can kind of do this, working from home, essentially. I don't need to drive in every day. And a lot of the stuff that is part of the business I'm already doing. And so she knew that over the time, what we've grown to at our firm and how I was handling a lot of the responsibilities there. And so ultimately it just came down to when the timing was right. And she knows, so our situation is a little different from Sarah's. So she's a school teacher. She's not making too much or not making enough to support our family lifestyle at the moment. So it kind of fires me up in a way, being that what I'm leaving on the table, because financially, we could have been comfortable for, our entire family life here. So it's a big leap of faith for us to just live off her salary, support our 1-year-old now, and make all these changes essentially here. But she's my biggest supporter. She knows that, she trusts me and my work ethic and knows how hungry I am to make this thing happen. So we'll see. I maybe should have another call in 6 months, touch base, see how things are going.
Sure. Yeah. Do you feel like your wife knew you were entrepreneurial, either, early on, maybe when you're dating or engaged? Do you think that was a known personality quality or a sort of goal desire that you had? Or did you feel like that came as a surprise to her later on, or maybe even to you later on?
Yeah, I'd say both of us, really. When I first graduated, I thought I'd work in a bank, just make good money and support my family, clock in, clock out every day. But we just kind of started to look at what we want more for us and our family, and realize that's more important than our job. Like, the job will help, obviously, us do things, but you need to start with what's important to us and how we can make that happen. And that would be me starting my own firm, giving that ultimate flexibility for us for the next 20, 30, forever years.
Were there any particular points of contention or challenges that y'all had to work through with this idea of of you starting your own firm?
Yeah, obviously, having the 1-year-old wanting to have another one sooner or later here, it'd be much more comfortable to have a secure job, the secure pay to raise a family. Maybe I start this 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and the kids are in school, college, whatever. But we just decided that let's do this thing now. We're always going to look back and say, oh, I should have done it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And really there's no risk to this, Alan. It's going to be what I make of it. And I know that I need to support the family. And, hypothetically, let's say I suck at this and I can't do it. Well, I know I can go back to work for a guy and we'll be fine. So I'm excited. She's excited for me, and we're going to make this thing happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's how I've always viewed it as well. I don't want to say it's risk-free, but there's just a good fallback plan. A lot of times people, they build businesses. I think about, someone who goes and starts a restaurant and just the capital overhead, how much you're locked into. I mean, Sarah talked about, just real estate investing, like there's a lot of risk there of not just going to zero, but going negative. And all of that. Whereas in financial planning, and part of it is just the I guess the lack of advisors that are coming into the industry. Some of it is, I would say, just the appreciation for those who have run their own business, whether they were successful or not. There's a lot of reasons why people may not find success in financial planning, and it has nothing to do with their abilities as a planner. Those are really coveted skill sets and learnings that they've had, and that all of us. Maybe not me anymore. I'm probably too far down the path, but most of us could have gotten a job in financial planning, making good money if that's ultimately what we decided to do. And so it does kind of create this, like, again, I want to call it risk-free, but it creates this buffer that you're like, yeah, like I've got a parachute if I need one, and it makes it more comfortable to jump out of the proverbial airplane. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you and your partner have had to overcome over the last 3 to 6 months or really since you launched, maybe, just with this idea of entrepreneurship? Like where are some of those tension points that you're experiencing that you have to work through with your partner? Sarah, I'll let you lead off.
Yeah. The last 2 years have been crazy, mostly childcare related. We ended up not having.
It's a lot. Childcare is a lot.
It is a lot. 2021 was, I'm not going to lie, probably like among the worst years of our lives. Because other than, Ruth was born, I mean, there were definitely highlights. She's a great baby. But our house got this Texas snow situation that happened a year and a half ago. We were out of the house for a couple of months, also right when she was born, and then we didn't have an au pair for 9 months. And I have never wanted to be a stay-at-home parent. It's just like really not in my nature. And there are days that I am just like constitutionally not that good at dealing with 3-year-olds. They are, Brandon, just wait for it. There's no such thing as the terrible twos. It is.
Oh, Sarah, don't be the you just wait person. Don't be the you just wait person. No one likes that person.
Sorry. But but it's moments like that. It was moments like that where like I didn't have childcare. I ended up having to do what I just did not want to do. And I wasn't able to work on the business the way that I wanted to. Because, I get life. I get life from family life, and I get life from work life. And when there were stretches that I couldn't do that, it was pretty bad. I think particularly on my mental health. That was probably the hardest. That has gotten definitely easier. And I'll also be honest, like when I first launched this, and I was like, what? It is great. There is many planners to work with realtors. Also, I realized that I am high both of our incomes in the same industry, and sort of. And I knew that could eventually be problem. As we all know, I mean, the real estate industry on his side has slowed down quite a bit. But I'm also like kind of right at that point where mine is picking up. And so I'm glad it's happening 2 years in and not a year and a half ago. But yeah, I mean, that's, when you do have two entrepreneurs, that is going to be constantly a conversation to be had.
And how are you navigating that conversation? Do you have sort of regularly scheduled times that you're trying to talk about these things? Does it only come up when you break and it's a fight every time? Like, how have you found to navigate that?
Two things. So we do like a weekly meeting. Generally, it's probably honestly every 2 weeks. I actually have sorry to the person who's going to be Googling this to put this in the chat, but a great friend of mine runs this, I guess, Instagram thing. I don't know. Her name's Jessica Stewart. It's called Joyfully Managed Family, Joyfully Managed Team. I've been friends with her for 15 years. And she has great structures around how to run family meetings. So if someone can't find that on the internet, I'll find it and put it in the chat in a few minutes. But so there's that family meeting structure. In the last year or two, we've done a little bit of marriage counseling. We did, which has been phenomenally successful. We did a method called, I don't know what it's called, but the book or the I think Ross says it's relational life therapy. I don't know. Okay. The guy who wrote the book, his name's Terry Real. The book is called Us. I haven't actually read the book, but I've read part of the book. But our therapist works in that style, and so we did like a 1 day, 6-hour thing that was really helpful at kind of getting at mostly childhood stuff and how it affects adult stuff. And then we basically see her quarterly, and that's enough. For us, it has made a huge difference for us.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Brandon, what are some of the sticking points that you've come across, and how have y'all worked to sort of navigate those?
Yeah. So again, the whole family scheduling balance dynamic is the toughest. Sarah hit the nail on the head there. I won't go any further, but also I think being that my wife is not in the industry, I'm my own team here. So the accountability just to make sure that I'm moving forward and not getting stuck on, working on my website for 3 weeks or working on the agenda sheet. There's a million pieces to put together here. And so I've just been kind of using, XY has resources. And then I have a couple buddies who are in a similar boat. We're kind of bouncing ideas off each other, just keep each other accountable to make sure that, I'm still moving forward with this. And it's hard for my wife to know what's going on because she doesn't know what I'm actually doing, why I'm doing it, essentially. Obviously I explained to her, but the ins and outs of running the business. So maybe when our well dries up here, we got a little bit of savings to run off. It'll definitely get more stressful eventually there. But for now, it's going okay.
No, thank you for sharing that. We run our businesses on the EOS system, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's something that podcast listeners or conference attendees may have heard us talk about, but they have a book called The EOS Life. And so that's another one that's for those who are not willing to go into more of the touchy-feely style, share your background and your burdens kind of thing, which I'm more of a fan of personally, but the EOS Life is a really good, business-minded, but how to structure your life and some of those relationship conversations and that sort of thing. So just another resource that's out there. Team just shared that in the chat. So of a way of just trying to create structure, because I think that's the hardest. I think it's the hardest part of being an entrepreneur is going from being given these sort of artificial constraints. We were told when to show up to work, what to wear. We were told when we could eat lunch. We were told who to meet with. And you become an entrepreneur and you're suddenly like, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. and I am solely accountable for the results that ultimately happen. And so you get all of these choices, and then you layer in kids. And I mean, you both have young kids. I've got young kids. My oldest is now 8. Youngest is about to turn 2. And they do not respect any of the structures that we put in place because they like to get sick. I swear I've had a sick kid for the last 2 months because they just like hand it off slowly. And it sort of, what works when they're healthy doesn't work when they're sick. And I do feel like that ongoing communication, Sarah, you mentioned that, of just that creating some of those tools, but then also having that regularly scheduled time on a weekly, biweekly basis, having that third party, bringing in that therapist is huge, just to be able to sort of mitigate those conversations and help mediate them, if you will, because it's a lot. It's hard, and suddenly it's like what was working, it's working great, and then it stops working, and you have to adjust. Have you found any of those, Brandon? I'm curious with like the schedule that you have. Like, have you found anything
Hey,
that like worked and then it stopped working?
knock on wood, but we got a good sleep schedule going so far. No, it's tough because I'm the type of guy when I get into the work groove, I need like hours. I can't be like pick up my laptop 30 minutes here, 30 minutes over here. I want to go for like 4 or 5 hours at a time. So like if my wife has a after school event or if our daughter doesn't sleep one day, now all of a sudden I'm needing to spend time there and I have to step away from, building this business here. It's hard on me because I know that I need to, keep going here, and then I run late nights and it screws up, now my schedule's screwed up essentially too.
Okay.
So it's
Sarah,
more
anything?
it's an understanding to know that, there's going to be these obstacles you have to overcome. Your schedule won't be a normal every day. There's going to be challenges there, but that's part of the business ownership.
Yeah, it is.
We have what I'm going to call an extreme luxury, in that my husband's parents bought a second house about 15 minutes from us. And they're only in it maybe once a week or once a month, for about a week, maybe 10 days. And so we actually, each of us almost every week goes and spends one night there. And so then we each get kind of a little stretch of time to relax and also work without interruption, because the pull of it's just impossible to work for more than 90 minutes at a time when you're in the house with little kids. You have to like physically, geolocate elsewhere. That said, the first time we did it, I just rented an absolutely awful Airbnb for like $60, and a decent amount of the like copy on my website I did while at that crappy Airbnb, also 10 minutes from my house, over a weekend. So, there are cheap Airbnbs all around if you don't have the luxury of a extra disposable house nearby to stay. It's worth
great.
the money. Like calculate the money, because like if it's literally you spend $60 every 2 weeks, like what's that? $150 with tax. Like it could be worth it a month if you think about it.
I love that. So you're using that as it sounds kind of both. Like you're using that as both time to just work focused in the business, but then also maybe some alone time where you're not the one getting woken up at 2:00 in the morning with whatever.
Yes, happily that doesn't happen. Ours do sleep. They all have. I like made sure that by the time they all turned a few months old. Except now we just moved the 2 big ones into the same room, and now they're like partying constantly.
Yep, 2 a.m. Lego party. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They keep besting us. It's like there's no point in childproofing basically, because they can fix it all.
Brandon, how are you finding time for yourself and for your wife? I mean, it just right now it sounds like it's a lot of not a lot of overlap in terms of time together, just because of her work and your business. So, have you been able to find ways to sort of build some time for yourself, or is that something you're still working towards?
So right now I'm in my lower level. We have a 3-story townhome. I got a baby gate, sound barrier up top stairs here to try to block the sound. Although I can still hear my dog whining to come down. But she's a teacher, so she has some more, just I'd say a few more holidays or just time off compared to like a normal, working business, whatever industry. So I'll take advantage of those days and work in the mornings and afternoons when she's home. But also I've kind of always been like a night hawk, I'd say, where I'll work late hours into the night. So after they go down, it's probably when I do my best work, middle of the night. And I'll do that a couple times a month here. No big deal.
Yeah, it's so important, and I do as I say, not as I did. I've been at this now over 10 years, I guess, is when I guess I became an entrepreneur in 2012. So yeah, it really has been just over 10 years. And in early days, I burnt the candle at both ends and did not make time for my partner. Didn't have kids yet, that sort of thing. But I will say that just that's been my priority over the last couple of years, particularly with COVID, when like kids came home and suddenly there's no privacy, there's no time alone, it's just chaos all the time. Is that trying to make time for yourself and then trying to make time for just you and your partner. And too often I hear, and everyone has their own parenting style, but I'll hear folks say like, oh yeah, like I didn't go on a date until with my husband or my wife until my kid was 6. It's like I really encourage, don't take that path. And even if date night is a Dairy Queen ice cream for $2 or whatever inflation has caused it to go to these days, and just like it's just like sitting in a parking lot having an ice cream without the kiddo nearby. Like that is so important because there are going to be times, and it's not always easy to talk about, but there are going to be times where business just gets really hard, and you need that relationship where your partner trusts you, they believe in you, and that they're not sitting there like, well, if you would just go get that 9 to 5, then we could spend more time together. Like you got to be aligned. And so I guess any examples or anything y'all run into with, I guess challenges in that area where it really has sort of come to a head and you've had to work through that?
Yeah.
That's never been a thing for us.
Never. Two entrepreneurs.
Well, I mean, no, like in the last 2 years, no, like that. We've never had that conversation of like, hey, you should just go get a 9 to 5 with either of us. No, because we value the flexibility enough. And I mean, at the end of the day, like we have enough savings. And so, it's, that's not.
It's given that flexibility. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
Brandon, any stories that might be helpful for listeners as they're considering this journey?
Like I said, I'm only 3 months in here, and there's been times where my wife comes home from work and she's exhausted, and our daughter's going crazy or something, and I need to help her out. So then I need to realize that's more important than spending this day here working on the business and spending time with them. So it's hard for me to then take a step back, know that I need to be doing a lot more here, but then I need to help out them. So that's been the biggest challenge, and I think that's something I'm definitely learning to deal with. And it's the hardest part now. It's just like you don't have a clear schedule. It's going to be, around the clock. Who knows when you can clock in? You want to have an ideal schedule, but it's not always you can't always stay to that.
Yeah, and not having the schedule is hard for me. That's Sarah. Is that a challenge as well for you? Just like the lack of schedule and predictability.
Oh yeah. You hear all of these like lovely, let's time block and like let's color code our gal. I'm like, that all sounds wonderful, and I really actually knew how to do that 5 years ago. It is not a thing.
Just get up if you get up at 3:30 in the morning and hustle, then you can just accomplish everything.
Right.
No, I appreciate sharing that, because I felt like it, and I'm not here to say woe is me for being a parent. I love my kids. I wanted to have a family. I did find the hustle culture of no schedule and this like bounce around. I felt that to be much easier when I didn't have kids, and the late nights and the early mornings or whatever, like it was fine. And now there is sort of this, now we have 3 littles that we've got to, schedule around all of their activities and getting sick and that sort of thing. And it sort of forces the need for more scheduling, but also just, again, it gets disrupted more often than it used to. And it can be a challenge to try to manage it. Any sort of going down the parenthood conversation, but have you found any apps? This is for personal. Have you found any apps or technology out there to help manage personal life and all the scheduling and craziness that comes with this? Or are you in the same boat I am, which is like Google Calendar?
One of those.
So, okay, what do you use?
I'm gonna change your people's lives. This actually came from my friend. I'm just kidding. I'm not really gonna change your life. My friend Jessica. Her idea was a little hack. to create a Gmail address that is for both of you. So ours is
Mhm.
theponderpack@gmail.com. Feel free to send us an email. And then it auto forwards to both of you for anything. And so anytime we're scheduling or just like signing up for websites that are for the kids or for just anything that you would automatically just want to have shared, we sign it up through that email address. And I know this doesn't sound like a huge deal, but like reducing the number of like, hey, did you get that email conversations actually is like measurably less stressful. That's just like a little one. And
No,
then
I
in terms
appreciate
of
that.
app, we just use a shared the Apple Notes shared note for checklist. That's it.
I
Nothing
keep
fancy.
thinking someone's going to create an app. I've tried a couple like Cozy, and there's some others, and I haven't found one that, especially because you have a third adult that you're coordinating with the au pair, that trying to coordinate schedules and who needs to do what, all of that can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I've
What
tried. I have like a little Zapier, I think in my Google Tasks. I think it zaps to his email, but then we found that it just got lost in email, and just having a shared note in your Apple Notes, simple, keep it simple.
Yeah, and I want to call out that this journey is tough, right? The decision to become an entrepreneur, the conversations with your partner, getting on the same page, staying on the same page. These are all really important things, and we have a little bit of self-selection bias happening here because you two are successfully navigating this. And I've had some members reach out to me and say, hey, be sure, like people before they start a firm, be sure they know that if they're not on the same page as their partner about this idea of entrepreneurship, either the business or the partnership will fail. And I think it's absolutely true. That's my story. That I was going to be a college professor, and my ex-wife married someone who she thought was going to be a college professor and not an entrepreneur, and I went the polar opposite. And I didn't know how to have the conversations before. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't prepared for just the roller coaster. And ultimately, the business made it, and the marriage did not. And I use that as not a cautionary tale, but I do want folks to know that like you may be having this conversation, you're hitting a wall where you're saying like, hey, I really want to do this, and your partner is really not on board, and they may never get on board. Like that may be your reality, and a conversation that I highly recommend third parties. So hire a couples counselor. The $200 an hour or whatever you end up paying is worth its weight in gold to help navigate these conversations, to really understand what is it about entrepreneurship. Is it that someone's mother was an entrepreneur and ultimately didn't make it, and cost the family a lot of money? Is it something else? Is it a risk tolerance thing? Like, what is the comfort level? Like, there's a million things it could be, but just really help spend the time on the front end, invest on the front end, because this will pay dividends later on. Because if you don't invest on the front end, you're going to start accruing debt, and debt always gets paid. And that debt is going to be relationship debt, conversation debt, and challenges that you're going to face. So I just want to call that out. That you may be hearing this, you're like, well, how do I get my partner to be okay with this? And it's like, well, there may be more work to be done on the front end when it comes to having these conversations, really understanding where folks are coming from. We did have a couple of questions submitted that I want to be sure we get to, and so one of those was just how much did you have saved before going out on your own? And Sarah, you mentioned, and you don't, if you don't feel comfortable sharing it over, that's totally fine. But you mentioned substantial retirement savings, but doesn't sound like you didn't mention like you were highly liquid. So it sounds like a lot of the savings were on the retirement side. Did you have a pretty significant amount of liquid savings, or were you primarily relying on income from your husband's business?
I don't remember exactly how much we had like in brokerage. I'm going to guess it was probably 50K, I would guess, in brokerage. And then he was making 250, 300, 2 to 300 at that point. And then combined like all of our various less liquid savings accounts, Roth, 401ks, whatever, was about $500,000. You don't need that much. We've never touched it. Obviously, it's gone down this year. but it just makes me feel better
Mm-hmm.
that it's there. And let's see. So when was this? 2020. I don't think we had a rental property at that time. We just had our primary residence. We did buy a rental property a year ago, and so now we have that as well.
Okay. So had savings, did not tap into it. It was mainly relying on income, it sounds like, but
Yeah.
the fallback of savings if you needed to get to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like it's all the same strategies that you tell your clients. I mean, if you probably want to have a HELOC in place, we do. It's there. It nice to have just in case. Same kind of strategies. We also tell, like, my realtor clients, I tell them, make sure you've got, like, if you feel like you need to make a like medium to large size purchase and you don't want to have to pay for it all in cash, like, call your credit card company, ask them if they can give you 0% for 12 months and up the limit, give you an extra, $10,000, $15,000 of just like security there. Get approved for like a personal line of credit at your local bank. There are all of those normal strategies that we all use with our clients. Just, make sure you have them in place yourself too.
I think normal to folks who work with folks in real estate. I bet a lot of advisors don't use a lot of those strategies. So, Brandon, sort of.
Well, I mean, I feel like yeah.
No, I love it. I totally agree with it. Yeah, Brandon, where were y'all at financially that made you comfortable kind of taking the leap?
So I baked in almost 2 years of I guess, negative cash flow right now between what my wife earns and what we, spent with our mortgage, car payments, etc. So we're dialing back Christmas gifts this year. Sorry, family, if anyone's on the call here, but it really doesn't take too much to get up and running here. I don't. If people have looked, it's, you gotta get registered, your RIA, you gotta get your LLC, get your tech stack going. I think I probably spent maybe $5,000 up front. I built my own website through Squarespace. Had a guy make a logo for a couple $100, nothing too crazy. But like I said, with our income situation, it's definitely going to help fire me up to get this thing up and moving here, to provide for everyone. But like I said, not too much in savings. Just the income will take less vacations next year.
Yeah, it sounds like 2 years of negative cash flow, which I like the way you frame that, because it's not, sometimes you say X number of years of expenses and that sort of thing. But yeah, as we like to remind advisors, it's not the cost of starting the business. I mean, this is a very, very low capital business. Again, we are not opening franchise locations and restaurants with microwaves that cost as much as what it costs to start an RIA. This is not a capital intensive business. It's the personal side. And honestly, I think it's a good question around savings, because I think this is an area that I do hear a lot of conflict between partners. If someone is a saver, I mean, and we see this with our clients. If any of us had worked with retiring clients, like, spending out of principal is really hard. Like, getting into distribution mode. And so for some folks, just seeing the savings dwindling, seeing the plan for how are we going to get to break even, and when are we going to make some decisions, instead of it sort of being this like, don't worry, I'm going to figure it out. It's like, hey, in 6 months, here's where I expect to be. If we're not here in a year, then we should be having a conversation about making a different choice. Like, and again, it all depends on your partner. And I'm on the flip side now. My wife is extremely entrepreneurial herself, and so sometimes we rabbit trail together, and someone has to sort of wheel us back in. Like, whoa, maybe too much. And it sounds like, Sarah, that may be somewhat you deal with as well when you're both entrepreneurial. And so everyone, just depending on the partnership that you're in and the comfort level of your partner, like, you got to really understand where they're coming from. Just like in financial planning, nothing is crazy when you understand where it comes from. And if your partner's not on board with this, there's a reason for it, and it's legitimate. And we shouldn't discount that. But we do have to spend the time and the energy to really understand it. But again, I appreciate y'all sharing that, because everyone sort of has a different path in terms of how they're approaching this. So I know we just have a couple of minutes left, so I'll ask you a final question, just in wrapping up around this topic of having the conversation with your partner. I'll pull from the podcast since that question has always worked for me. And that is sort of, what's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your pre-entrepreneurial self when it comes to the conversation with your partner? Is there something that you wish you that you could have done? Or maybe something you did that you're really proud of that you would share with the audience?
Yeah, I can go first here. So take your time. This doesn't have to happen overnight. You're your own. I mean, you trust yourself, and if you're a believer that you can make this thing happen, be ready to tell your partner before, just like, oh, what are your thoughts on this? Like, have it kind of mapped out what your goals are, how it's best for the both of you, not just yourself. So for me, like I said, I started thinking about this during COVID times, and then, gosh, yeah, I don't know if I have much more to add to that, Alan. Just take your time, do your research. There's a million different brokerages, like your tech stack, who you're going to use. Just have like a light plan, and then start looking to why you'd want to make the switch, how it will impact the rest of your life, rather than just professionally.
I love that. Very often the advice is just do it, just jump in. So I appreciate the advice of, it's okay to take your time, slow down, be sure you get it done right.
Yeah, don't have to have everything mapped out. You won't, because I've learned a lot of things since opening up here. But just, have an idea of where this is taking you, and, ultimately, why do you want to do that?
Absolutely. Sarah, what would be your advice?
I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but in the last few months, now that I've worked with more clients, I have really started to realize that, particularly for people like us that are youngish, 30s, 40s, still a decent time away from retirement, and that have all of our needs met, safety, all of those things. The bank account balances and net worths is literally just a number. Like, don't forget that. Don't forget that, like, if the number changes up or down, it's not about your worth as a person. It's like, as that number changes, it's probably because of choices and things that you're trying to prioritize. And, like, if the number goes down in the first couple of years, but you've gotten the, like, intangible of getting to spend more time with people, you've gotten the intangible of maybe sleeping in, I don't know. All of those intangibles are all things that matter just as much as the number on the balance sheet. When this, like, came into clear focus for me was when most of my clients are probably 8 to 10 years older than me, at least. And, so many times we get clients in their late 40s, early 50s who would literally not save for retirement. Mm-hmm. And like, they're not freaking out. I mean, they kind of are, but they're not really freaking out. And you just have to remind yourself that, like, you're a financial planner. Like, you've probably put a little more thought into this, particularly if you're doing it younger. And, like, if you don't save for retirement for a couple of years, it's 20 years away. Save more next year. enjoy your life. If you don't, like, enjoy the life that you have, you only get one body, you only get one life.
Yeah, it's good advice, particularly for financial planners. And we have about 10 seconds, and I'll just address one question that came through, because I think it's an important one, which is David in the chat was asking about. It's basically saying the struggle was for his spouse is the idea of not being able to sort of maintain current lifestyle and having to take a step back, not being able to afford the luxuries you may be able to afford now. And I would just, my advice is what, as my sales coach likes to say, Nancy Blakey, she said, what's in it for them with it? What's in it for them? If we make it all about us and I'm becoming an entrepreneur, so I have the flexibility, so I can do this, so I can do that. It's like, yeah, but what do I get out of this? Because in a partnership, you're two equals. What is in it for them? Is it more time availability? Is it that you hope to be able to make more money? And what is that money ultimately going to lead to? Because you may find, like, more money is it leading to more happiness, as we see with a lot of our clients? So is that really leading, like what is it, the more ability to travel, the ability to build a business, and that's going to, be able to give you something that, and again, how is that going to benefit them? And really navigating those conversations. I'm not going to say it's easy, because my advice is hire a therapist sooner rather than later. We start working with a therapist that individually and as a couple to be able to help navigate some of this, because you're going to need some of those muscles as you decide to start your own firm and navigating some of the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. So I apologize for running over. Thank you all so much for joining us. Sarah, Brandon, thank you for taking the time to come on and share some on a tough topic that's pretty intimate. And I appreciate you being willing to talk about your journey with into entrepreneurship and how that how your partnership has impacted that and how you've been able to navigate it. So thank you both.
Welcome.
All right, and for those attendees, we'll follow up with additional email if you're interested in talking with anyone here at XYPN. If you're interested in starting your own firm or joining XY Planning Network, we will get you connected with one of our network navigators, and a link will be coming out to you for that. I will be sending you back to the lobby here shortly, and there is a feedback survey if you'd be willing to give us some feedback. We really appreciate it. Otherwise, look for our next webinar coming up next month. Again, on January 11th, new year, new firm, launching your own firm in 2023. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.